These are some evidence-based guidelines for hypertrophy. So building some muscle, especially if you're over the age of 40. Now, the guidelines that Mr. Stan Efferding and I are going to talk about today definitely don't just apply to people over 40. They're applicable throughout all age ranges, but we want to put a little bit more emphasis on that. So I have with me Mr. Stan Efferding, who is obviously an expert in building muscle and has a lot of accolades behind him. So Stan, awesome to have you.
Thank you. You know, I've been at this a long time, over 35 years, and back when I started lifting, we didn't have all of this information. The internet didn't even exist. It was back when dinosaurs were still roaming the earth. So I had to hop in my car in Oregon and drive all the way down to Gold's Gym Venice, the mecca of bodybuilding at the time, with all the big names in the magazines, and ask a lot of questions. And in doing that, I acquired a lot of pretty good information. And here we are 30 years later. We've got some fantastic scientists. Brad Schoenfeld, Brett Contreras, just a couple of many fantastic researchers that have done a lot of studies, and they put together kind of the best evidence for hypertrophy. And so these are the guidelines that I give my clients in order to optimize muscle hypertrophy. We'll talk a little bit about some variations here in terms of strength and joint integrity, but mostly I just want to dial in on the most important stuff for hypertrophy. The first question I get asked, and you probably do too, is way down here on the bottom of the list: what's the best split?
Yep.
You know, and that's whether you do a upper body, lower body, or you do a 2 days on, 1 day off, or all those questions. And people think there's some sort of magic split. It's way down here at the bottom of the list because it's one of the least important things. So it's really a matter of personal preference and your schedule. What can you do consistently that fits within your lifestyle? That's most important in terms of the split. But there's a lot of things that once you decide what your split's going to be, there's a lot of things that you do have to apply in order to optimize hypertrophy. And we'll go down the list. First of all is frequency. It seems optimal to train every body part twice a week. That means that you could do your full body on Monday and your full body on Friday. You'd have satisfied that evidence-based guideline for hypertrophy.
Gotcha.
Or you can do upper body Monday, lower body Tuesday, upper body Thursday, lower body Friday, and so on. But you're training everything about twice a week. That's optimal for hypertrophy. Then people ask, well, how much volume? How many sets do I do? The range seems to be about 10 to 20 sets a week. And that would be sort of what's considered a minimum effective volume and maybe a maximal recoverable volume. Some people may be able to do more. So maybe you come in to do, say your split is a Monday, Friday, full body. You'd only have to do 5 sets per body part on Monday and 5 sets per body part on Friday to achieve the minimum effective volume. And that would be for hypertrophy, not just maintenance. That would actually cause you to grow. For maintenance, you might only need 5 sets a week.
Wow.
To be able to maintain muscle tissue. And we promote that heavily in terms of people who are dieting to lose weight.
Yeah.
Please lift weights, because otherwise you'll lose muscle tissue and you'll lower your BMR. And what we're trying to do is make sure that you hold on to as much muscle as possible. That would be maybe your minimum commitment. 5 sets a week per body part. Maybe only training once a week. Just get to the gym once a week and do 5 sets per body part. You could be in and out of there in 30 minutes. You could hold on to your muscle. But to optimize hypertrophy and grow, that's about the volume that we're looking for. So anywhere from 5 to 10 sets per body part twice a week would get you your range of 10 to 20.
So just to interrupt, so you could feasibly do even a full body split a couple times per week as long as you're kind of hitting that volume.
Absolutely. Yeah, and full body splits actually seem to have the best effect in terms of kind of your overall body fitness and insulin sensitivity. So it's really a good idea.
Okay.
As you progress and you get closer to this 20 sets per week, it becomes harder to do the full body.
Two-hour workout.
It's a 2-hour workout, and that's just a matter of what are your time constraints. Now, effort. This is pretty important. I liken this to the difference between exercise versus training. If you do 10 reps and you could have done 20, you're exercising, you're not training. The effort invested in that set is probably not enough to cause an effective stimulus to grow muscle. And so we do want to get within 1 to 3 reps of failure. The more experienced you are, the closer you want to get to failure.
Let's go.
But a newbie, you can leave 3 or 4 reps in the tank and still make sufficient progress. You don't have to go to failure. I always thought that.
Yeah.
And you end up creating a lot of fatigue, a lot of delayed onset muscle soreness, potentially get closer to injury. And so, we like to let people leave reps in the tank so that we can optimize the frequency. Now you can come back 2 days or 3 days later and feel refreshed instead of burned out.
Yeah, it's exactly, it's kind of where I'm at now with small kids. It's like I don't want to just debilitate myself. I want to be able to be on the ground, with my kids and rolling around and not hurting. So in essence, would you say there's like kind of a line of diminishing return with how close you get to failure? Like if it's you get to 3 reps within failure, and you still get the job done, you still get the hypertrophic response, but you feel alive and you feel energetic the rest of the day, versus going all the way to failure. I mean, does it kind of decrease the closer that you get? Like if someone's going all the way, are they really getting that much more than someone that's leaving 2 in the tank?
No, and maybe not anything more is what we're seeing now. Going to failure is no more effective than leaving a rep or 2 in the tank in terms of the measurable benefits for hypertrophy. And that lends itself well to what you said when we started, appealing to people over 40 because it's less fatigue. And that's one of the biggest concerns for joints and just for general energy, et cetera. Mental energy is that you don't need to create that much fatigue for your body and cause that much DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. And it should be enjoyable. You should feel refreshed. You'll be a little sore, but it should be the muscles, not the joints or the central nervous system. You get that post-squat, what we call the sleepies, where you're just exhausted the whole next day and you got brain fog.
Or it loops around and you don't sleep because you're
100%.
Yeah,
it's not essential. Yeah. It's really not. And I used to think it was. It's coming from a guy who was a power lifter first and foremost. And I always tried to grind out that last rep to failure and have somebody give me a spot. Not terribly more effective.
Yeah.
Not at all more effective. That gets us to load. You can lift a heavy weight, about 85% of your 1 rep max for around 5 reps. Or you can lift a medium weight, around 70% of your 1 rep max for between 8 and 15 reps. Or you can lift a pretty light weight, about 30% of your 1 rep max for 20 to 30 reps. They all yield equivalent hypertrophy outcome, assuming you get to within 1 to 3 reps of failure and have adequate volume and frequency. The load, you get a consistent hypertrophy response irrespective of the amount of weight that you use.
Interesting.
Having said that, you get more fatigue in the 5 rep range. You do get stronger. You'll get more strength. You get more fatigue in the 5 rep range. You also experience a little more fatigue in the 20 plus rep range. So this seems to be the sweet spot in terms of getting the best hypertrophy with the least fatigue, again, allowing you to recover faster, increasing your volume and frequency over time. There is a caveat to that in terms of tendons. You need about a minimum of 70% of your 1 rep max to get an effective stimulus to strengthen and grow tendons over time.
Okay.
So the lighter weight's probably not terribly effective for that. But you don't need the 85% loads, which I liked as a power lifter, but I discovered that wasn't the best way, for the optimal way for hypertrophy, because it would compromise the amount of time it takes you to recover, and that would compromise your volume and your frequency.
Now, I know there is a formulation for this, or a formula for this, excuse me, but for someone that is new, how do they just determine their 1 rep max? Is there an easy way for them without having to, calculate everything, or without literally having to test your 1 rep max?
Yeah, if you can just keep adding weight until you have a difficult rep, you're within 10%, and you can just make a, kind of an average, an estimate of what that is. The 1 rep max, it can be a guesstimate, it can be a general number. Still, when you want to find the right rep range, anywhere between 8 and 15 reps, it's just an estimate, but you'll know, here's how I kind of determine it when I get a client. They'll ask me how many reps, and if I don't know yet what they're capable of, whenever this happens, then I know they've reached maximal muscle fiber recruitment and some of the fibers are dropping off and failing. I'm good. That's the end of your set. You don't need to grind out another one. When the speed significantly reduces, I know they've reached what we call maximal muscle fiber recruitment. Got it.
Nice. Come on, push. That's one. Come on, whoop. Strong. Strong. Beautiful.
And today's video sponsor is ButcherBox, and I guess it's going to be totally relevant with today because we're talking about building muscle. So when it comes down to building muscle, one of the things that I talk about, Stan talks about a lot, prioritizing protein. So if you want to check them out, they are an online meat delivery company. So grass-fed, grass-finished beef delivered right to your doorstep. Super awesome, really awesome chicken, awesome fish selection, cod, sockeye salmon, you name it. So all getting delivered directly to your doorstep. And again, grass-fed, grass-finished stuff. So you just go online, pick your cuts, you choose whatever you want, whether it's ribeye, maybe you want New Yorks, maybe you want fillets, whatever you want. It gets delivered to your doorstep in a couple of days. Super awesome stuff, and there's a special link down below for you to check them out after this video. Again, it's called ButcherBox, and that link is down below. And a huge thank you to them for continuing to support this channel and making this content possible.
Next would be the exercise selection. We like to put multi-joint movements in first. Your bench, your squat, your deadlift, your dips, your chin-ups, things that, a push exercise that works chest, shoulders, and triceps. A pull exercise that works back and biceps. A leg exercise, of course, that would work, all of your quadriceps and glutes and your hip flexors, etc. Those would be prioritized, but single joint exercises can provide just as much hypertrophy benefit. But you'd need to probably do a variety of exercises to hit your chest and your tris and your shoulders. If you're doing things like cable crossovers, then you'd also need to do tricep pushdowns and also need to do some side laterals. Whereas a dip or a bench press or an incline press would get all three.
Gotcha.
And you kind of see, because people, genetically, they respond differently. So you can see over time which body parts responding well and which are lagging.
Yeah.
And then we go down to exercise order, and you can prioritize those that you want to preferentially grow, or might be what's you consider to be a weak point that's not getting proper work from your current program.
You mentioned something yesterday that I think is just a really good little gem for people. Stan had mentioned when it comes time for cutting and dropping fat, one of the things you used to do is you would do multi-joint movements, but then rather than prioritizing some forms of cardio, you would do maybe some single joint movements in between or do some auxiliary moves in between, just kind of keep moving that way.
100%.
And that almost serves as, in a way, for lack of a better term, a form of cardio, which is just not necessarily in line with building muscle, but I thought it was a great point to mention because it was a really cool little trick.
We're going to touch on that again here, just a couple things down the road, and talk about our workout today briefly, and how that accommodated people with time constraints. So prioritize the exercises, the body parts that you want to get the most results from. Say you've got lagging calves or hamstrings. Train those first. Biceps, train them first, and then do your stronger parts afterwards, and you might get better results from that. Tempo, a lot of discussion about what the pace that a rep should be at. It seems that about a 2 to 5 second eccentric, bring it down under control is really all that is. 1, 2, press, or 1, 2, 3, press. A 10-second eccentric's unnecessary and not more effective. And a 1 second eccentric where there's no resistance on the way down, not as effective as controlling the movement. And so that would be your tempo. Rest periods, 2 to 3 minutes. There's a lot of discussion about this. We're talking primarily about hypertrophy today.
Yeah.
And the research suggests that if you give your body, say if you do a dip for chest, give it 2 minutes before you do another set of dips. A smaller body part like triceps or biceps might only need 90 seconds. Calves might only need 90 seconds. A squat, you might need 3 or 4 minutes just to remember your name if it's a heavy, set of 12 or something like that. So kind of base it on your ability to recover from that set and be able to invest a similar amount of effort without a significant decline in the number of reps or the amount of weight that you used previously, which would be mostly from, say, oxygen debt or lactate, hydrogen ion buildup. You want to be able to somewhat recover from the previous exercise or the set of dips so that you can do reasonably close to the same amount of reps or weight that you did to the prior set. A lot of times people will do a lot of sets very fast to save time, and you end up down into kind of what a muscular endurance, really, kind of like a CrossFit, and that would be specific to your sport. That might be, it's one of the ways that we train MMA athletes is we shorten the rest periods. And that's because the demand of their sport is such that you have to keep a certain level of aerobic fitness or muscular endurance. But for hypertrophy, try and give yourself 2 minutes. Now, I know a lot of folks, they got to get in and out of the gym. And they don't have time to sit there and wait for their chest to recover from the previous exercise. Well, that's when we start using what we call supersetting antagonistic body parts, like we did today. So you would do a set for chest and just rest 1 minute, and then do a set for back and rest 1 minute. Well, by the time you get back to chest, you've had your 2+ minutes of rest, and you can get an equivalent number of reps or move about the same amount of weight the same number of times. And that will give you an optimum hypertrophy benefit, but also shorten the window under which you have to be here in the gym. We finished an entire workout today where we did 8 sets for chest and 8 sets for back in 25 minutes. And there was 4 of us in here training. And so that was that got us into this time constraint for busy professionals. That gets us down to the split. We kind of talked about that. It's personal preference. You can work your full body twice a week. You can do a push-pull legs, say a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then take a day off and do it again. You can do an upper-lower split. However you decide to do it, it doesn't matter as long as it fulfills these hypertrophy guidelines so you get the best benefit out of it. Next to be periodization, you should have a plan and then try and progress load over time. Your body will adapt, and it has to have a progressive stimulus, meaning you got to add 1 more rep or 5 more pounds or 1 more set in terms of increasing your volume, your total sets per week. Progress that over a period of 6 to 12 weeks through what we'd call a hypertrophy block.
Yeah.
Remembering periodically, maybe every 4 weeks or so, to have we call a deload, where you just use maybe half the weight for half the reps or half the sets, or just take a day off.
Yeah.
People think that if they take a day off, they're going to regress. And in fact, the long-term research suggests that those people who train continuously versus those people who take a week off every 4 to 6 weeks, they have similar outcomes.
Interesting.
And so you don't need to invest all that time and energy, and you won't get any extra benefit out of it.
Yeah.
So pay yourself first by giving yourself some rest time every now and then. It's a good refresher. And you can choose to completely take the whole week off, or you can choose to, again, just go in and move a little, half the sets, half the reps, half the weight. It won't feel challenging at all. You'll get nowhere near the amount of volume or effort that would be required for hypertrophy, but it's long-term, comparing groups of people who use both methods, it's the same outcome.
Awesome. And I know something that people will ask a lot, and they ask me a lot, and of course I'm at a different stage of where I'm training now. I'm training much more hybrid athlete, a lot of endurance work, still trying to maintain strength. So what's always applicable to me isn't always applicable to people that are watching. So for someone that is trying to build muscle or even maintaining, given you have all these different options with different splits and different periodization, where does something like high intensity interval training fall in terms of still having some cardio effect in there, right? Still want people to maintain that a little bit. Some people don't, some people do, but if someone says, hey, I really like my HIIT, I like the way it feels, where does that fall in?
We like to separate that from the hypertrophy workout because of maybe a competing stimulus, at least by 6 hours, but alternate a different day would be ideal.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do a hypertrophy workout on Monday, do a HIIT training session on Tuesday. HIIT versus LIS, low intensity, steady state cardio, in terms of calorie consumption, although you'll burn more calories in a shorter period of time with HIIT, if you compare the two in terms of weight loss, they're similar.
Yeah, they definitely are.
And HIIT might even have a bigger interference effect on your hypertrophy training than LIS.
Yeah.
And so I do like to separate that kind of thing. And it would be simply if that's what your sport demanded or that's what you enjoyed, what's the best exercise, the one you'll do.
Yeah.
And so I always find out first what's your preference, what will you do consistently. A lot of people, we love lifting. Some people don't. And so we have to try and almost tease them into getting some sort of loading using the kind of exercises they like to do. Just load them. So that's the biggest consideration. In terms of cardiovascular fitness, you don't need HIIT to achieve a healthy level of VO2 max. You can get that just from a brisk 10-minute walk 3 times a day, like I spoke of, which is probably more sustainable and fits people's schedules better. You can do it anywhere at any time. I just find that long-term the compliance is better with the 3 10-minute walks. And then, like today, we had a pretty good heart rate going for 25 straight minutes because we did a dip, we rested shortly, did a chin up, rested shortly, did a dip. We were gassed by the end of the workout. That, I can't call it HIIT because it doesn't meet the definition of HIIT necessarily, but our heart rate was elevated significantly for 25 straight minutes. I consider that to be my cardiovascular training in terms of health.
Of course, yeah.
And I also get the benefit of the hypertrophy training because retaining lean muscle mass or building muscle is probably second to your VO2 max, the best predictor of mortality.
Yeah.
So I think that gets us down. We talked about periodization. At the end of the day, you can't just cross T's and dot I's and think there's some special magic program or hack or trick. It's going to be hard work. Yeah. The easy gains, the honeymoon period will expire between 3 to 6 months, and then it's going to just be a matter of going in and continually doing a little bit more, maybe varying the exercises that you select through your hypertrophy block, just small angle changes, etc. But you're still going to have to progress that over time with 1 more set, 1 more rep, 5 more pounds in order to continue to make gains. And the gains initially will be great. That's why we love getting people in the gym initially, because they'll get really strong really fast. A lot of that's neural adaptation. It's not necessarily because they got stronger per se, but they got more coordinated and their body learned to fire all the muscles so they could do a bigger deadlift. So something like a deadlift or a squat or a bench press will progress very quickly for a beginner. After that, the gains are a little slower. You got to be persistent and consistent and hopefully enjoy the training program. Otherwise, you're not going to do it long term. And then down here, I kind of mentioned earlier, It's twice as hard to gain. We talked about that in terms of hard work, but only half as hard to maintain. And so you could get away with, we talked about volume, probably 5 sets a week with a reasonable amount of intensity for every muscle in the body, which would just be a push, pull, or legs, and hold on to muscle tissue with something as minimal as that if, in fact, time constraints were an issue.
Yeah, well, especially if you're, older, you're busy, you don't have to destroy yourself trying to maintain, and that's, and even with aerobic capacity, it's different. Aerobic capacity, I don't want to scare people when I say you lose it quicker, but you do lose it quicker.
You do.
And it's definitely something that, as you get older, you want to make sure that you're kind of meeting these minimum requirements for maintenance if you already have that clay mass built, so to speak. And then, yeah, it's not a bad idea to focus a little bit on your cardiovascular with whatever means that, that is. And one other thing to consider is whenever you're doing your cardio or your HIIT or anything like that, you have to plan it accordingly so that you probably don't want to have, 20 minutes of HIIT on an assault bike or an echo bike the day after you crushed legs. It's probably a recipe for disappointment and just discomfort in a bad way. And not to mention just when you stiffen up, different muscles stiffen up, you're going to be activating different muscles when you're doing your cardio, more risk of injury. So think about that too. If your cardio is more lower body oriented cardio, perhaps you want to have that follow the upper body workout, which was the day prior, kind of.
Yeah, I've found that as I've aged, I'm 54 now, and I'm still able to maintain a significant workload, but I have to move more outside the gym. That's why I love the 10-minute walks. The frequency is more important than the intensity or volume in any one session.
I'm with you. Yep.
So I just have to keep moving. I'm like the Tin Man without an oil can now, and if I sit for too long, I start to bind up. So if I have a big leg day, my strategy for recovering from that and getting ready for the next day's workout, and I've been using this for 12 or 14 years, since 2009, when I was training with Mark Bell, I put a recumbent bike in the hotel room I was staying at down in Sacramento when I was training with Mark. And on Sunday, we would do a heavy squats day. We would get up over 800 pounds on squats. And I used to just lay in bed for like 2 days thinking I was recovering. I would sleep as much as possible. I would be sore for a long time, and every time I got up, I was just aching. So I put the recumbent bike in my room, and on Sunday when I squatted, that evening, I would do a little 10-minute HIIT session. I would sit on the bike, and I would do about 40 or 50 seconds of spinning at a reasonable pace under modest tension, and then rest for 10 or 15 seconds. I would do that 10 times. It takes me 10 minutes. But I'd get a little pump in my legs, and it was all concentric. I wasn't loading, because it was all just push, push, push. Yeah. It was a lightweight. I was getting my heart rate up. I was pumping a ton of blood into my legs and knees. And I would find that I would do that also the next day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 3 10-minute bikes. And by Tuesday, I was completely recovered. And so I would just suggest that you try and design something as you age that includes frequent movement throughout the day and pumps a ton of blood into the area. That's why I love running stairs for HIIT, low impact, as opposed to sprinting where you have that eccentric force from slowing the body down. And that can be pretty dynamic, that can be pretty stressful. Pulling sleds is another one. Just load up a sled with weight and put a belt around and just walk with it back and forth. Put a treadmill on about 14 degrees and actually walk backwards on a treadmill. Puts a ton of blood into the knees and the quads. It feels fantastic. You get a little burn, but there's no real loading. There's no muscle damage. It's all recuperatory. And I find that's a great way to recover from a big workout and prepare for the next one. Just some strategies to use.
No, outstanding. Hopefully out of this you can craft your own plan and be off to the races. And Stan, as always, man, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.